case you haven't noticed, the church in America doesn't have a great reputation among outsiders. Just open up your internet browser and begin the search, why is the church so ... and you'll see how autofill finishes the question for you after so many searches have already been entered. Why is the church so rich, so powerless, so silent today? These are the searches that millions of people across the United States and beyond are looking up in Google every single day. Questions that people have about why the church isn't what they wished it would be. There are very few people asking online, why is the church so kind? Why is the church so giving? The fact is, most people no longer have a positive view of the church. This alone could be an indictment of what we're doing or not doing in the Western church. It wasn't always this way. Christianity used to be known as fruitful. The community used to turn to churches and religious organizations to help solve problems in the social sector or to provide when people were in times of great need. The church used to be the center of community, but things changed. And as time passed, the prevailing attitude towards the church shifted to being just acceptable. In other words, if you were a Christian, that was okay. People didn't see it as being necessarily a positive, but they weren't concerned about it. The church was seen as neutral, but the shift didn't stop there. Soon, people began to be a little more skeptical, and then a lot more skeptical. If the church is your kind of thing, people wondered about you. They heard of the sex scandals and the financial mismanagement and the greed of prominent evangelists. A growing antagonism toward not only the church, but of people of faith took root. And today, sadly, in the wider culture, Christians in the church are perceived not only as irrelevant or ineffective, but as extremist and as part of the cultural problem. People often stereotype the church as negligent regarding social problems, or worse, the primary source of division and pain and perpetuated intolerant aggression in society. And it's not entirely unfounded. The church often fails to live up to her own standards. When non-Christians think of the church, they often default to thinking of judgmental and hypocritical people, negative and controlling environments, broken relationships, and power-mongering, walking by the under-resourced and the brokenness in our world. And although it is very heartbreaking, maybe this relatively new view of the church isn't that far off base. Maybe it's not the result of a liberal media or other external influence, but of our own very real failings. Traditionally, how have we tried to counteract that growing cultural belief that the church is harmful, judgmental, and disinterested in anything but your conversion, your voting direction, and your money? Well, usually we just keep pounding the truth. We just keep preaching. We just keep reiterating the facts harder, louder. Our evangelism efforts for quite some time now have focused on making sure everyone knows Christianity is true, along with the fact that what others believe is false or wrong. In the face of people who think Christianity is harmful, our reply is to accentuate the facts even louder. When Christ existed, lived, and died for all of us to be saved, here is true and correct theology, and yours is the wrong moral stance to take, we say to the outsiders. We're quick to point out where others fall short and are less interested in their point of view. And we still need to share the truth. Hear me out. I believe that. I bless the truth of our message and that side of the equation and our role in communicating it. But if we open our eyes and are honest within ourselves, people are not only questioning whether or not what we're saying is true. What they're questioning is whether or not it's good. Whether or not Jesus' followers are good. Is Christianity actually good for my life? Is Christianity actually good for society? Does following Christ lead to changed people who do good, or does it lead to hateful, judgmental hypocrites? Before we can effectively convince people today that following Jesus is factual, we have to also show following Jesus is fruitful. There are some other interesting data points about what non-Christians are really looking for. In the Barna and Alpha Reviving Evangelism study, we discovered that 7 in 10 non-Christians and lapsed Christian adults are not on a self-prescribed quest for spiritual truth. 7 in 10. That means that most people, even when presented with compelling facts, aren't initially interested in them. Facts simply are not always the right starting point. 38% of the same group reports they don't have any questions about faith. Of course, this percentage is higher among the atheists and agnostics in the group over the lapsed Christians, but over a third are saying they don't have any questions. So why do we keep trying to give them answers to questions they're not actually asking? But 34%, or 1/3 of non-Christians, do hint at something that might raise their interest in following Jesus. There is something we as the church could do to begin flipping this equation. What is it? Reputation. 1/3 of non-Christians have said they would be actually more interested in the Christian faith if Christianity had a better reputation. This is one of the highest reported factors compared to any other that would open their hearts to faith in Jesus. What we are seeing is an entire group of people who aren't looking for the facts that we have and preach, who have few, if any, perceptible questions about faith, but will become interested if the church can somehow salvage its reputation. They would be interested if the church did more good in the world, if the church stopped fighting among itself, if the people in the church could make as a top priority positive changes in the brokenness that they see in the world. And yet we keep trying to bring people to faith by using facts alone, by talking about truth, by making philosophical arguments. What if there's another more effective way? What if our fruitfulness could turn this tide of disinterest? Historically, our evangelism efforts have relied on proclamation alone, hoping proclamation will lead to revelation. Culture doesn't want to be just preached at. People need space to be listened to before they can even hear themselves and then make a decision. And now I'm adding to this the idea that demonstration of the fruit of our faith, of the goodness of Christ and of the church, demonstration can open the door of interest to even have these conversations. Remember, Romans 2:4, it's God's kindness which leads to repentance. Demonstration leads to conversation, which allows and makes space for proclamation, which hopefully, prayerfully, results in revelation. Demonstration, conversation, proclamation, and then ultimately revelation. So, what must we add to our evangelism if we want it to become effective in a world wondering whether or not who we are and what we believe is even good, let alone true? Galatians 5:22-23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law.